Gilgy. Nope, nope, nope.
Hello,
There we
hello,
go.
hello,
Here we go.
hello.
Here we go. Here we go.
Hello.
All right. Welcome back. Were you all here for Scott's talk? Scott Hanselman?
Yeah.
Just so you, okay, you knew who I meant. All right. Damien
That's just
Edwards.
Scott. Yeah. David Fowler.
David Fowler. We work on the ASP .NET team. This is a follow-on talk. The idea here is there is no structure to this talk whatsoever. You have David, who is probably the chief design, architect, dev, all the rest of it for ASP NET vNext, and me, who really doesn't do anything. I'm a PM, as Scott said, so I answer email. But I will mediate. So we want to hear your really tough questions, or maybe your really easy questions, to do with ASP.NET vNext. We have a new version of Visual Studio that was released this week, that crazy CTP installed. We have Ubuntu. Did I say it right?
Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. We have OS X,
Yeah.
and we have Windows 8.1, so we can show you cross-plat stuff. And there's a whole bunch of other ideas I gave there, or you may have some question that I haven't thought of. So I'm going to open it up for a couple of minutes. We're going to list the questions down, and then we'll go through and start answering them with code. Yes?
When you change the symbols in the middle of the kind of structure of dependencies, how does assembly loading dependencies work?
Okay.
Awesome.
So the question was, how does the runtime load assemblies? Right? Given that there's no compile up front, right?
Yeah, you might have different
Versions of stuff.
Okay.
Side by side. Yeah.
Cool. Yes. Now, then next to you. Yes.
Yes, I'm really curious how the solution, today in ASP.NET, we got the solution file and the CSV file.
Yep.
I want to see what is the file structure compared to you had the ease of files.
Okay. So you want to know more about the file structure, okay? What
Project
is the
system,
new project
solutions
system
versus-
file structure for vNext, right? Okay. Yes.
Question. How will the test arrive there from today? Should we use Katana?
Okay.
Aha. Good.
Good question. So the question is,
What are the
how
most
do
portable
I
patterns?
plan to move from today to vNext? Does that accurately capture what you want to know? And for example, we have this Katana thing, which we've been talking about, Owen and a bunch of other stuff. Okay? Some a little bit further back, maybe. I've done a few up the front. Yes,
there.
you, sir, next to the projector. Didn't hear a word of that. That's why I'm answering from the front. Assembly neutral interfaces.
Sure.
Beautiful. What are assembly how do you spell neutral?
Neutral, that's right.
Interfaces. Okay. A couple more? Yes, sir. Why did Scott ask for Windows 8.1? Okay. Why do we need Windows 8.1 right
Over there.
now?
Over there. Oh, no.
Oh. Yes, people over here.
Oh, my God.
Yep. What about Windows services? Great question. A lot of people write Windows services if they control their servers. Neil.
What about when you have a new package
Yep.
and you download the source?
Okay.
And you make a change to the source and you want to pack back up and send it up. How do you maintain concurrency? Or the idea? I know there's no story around this yet, but is there a plan about the story? Where you
So-
make changes to the local source
Okay.
and then you want to deploy that and you say you want to send it out as a package to all the rest.
So I'm a package author.
Yeah.
Okay. How do
So
I...
you copy MVC and you make your own changes to it. How
Well,
do you deploy it? And
Is
maintain
it
that copy?
about taking the sources of one of my dependencies, or is if I make a library,
Well, like for example, if you take down MVC and you make an adjustment
A change to it.
that one?
on that, and you say, right,
I'd say,
I want to keep it going, but I want to send it back up as a package. I don't need to build the source every time.
Yeah.
okay. How do I
Do you rename it yourself?
change to...
Sticky issue of strong naming.
Okay. How do I make a change to code sources of dependencies and push those back, right? Okay. Couple more? Yes? What's up with the new HTTP abstraction? Very nice. What's up with the new HTTP abstraction? What about poor old system.net.htp? Okay. A couple more. Whoop, that's not the key I wanted. Don't look behind the curtain. Anyone else? We got a good list here now?
When Scott made those changes earlier,
Yep.
Yeah.
he
I'm not quite sure how they relate to each other, but
Because there was no
you mean when he changed MVC inside his project and it kept working?
strong dependency on in the old days with strong naming.
Interesting. How did that thing work when Scott changed MVC in his project,
What about strong naming?
for example, or i.e. strong naming? Okay. All right, one more. Who's got the last question? Yes, sir.
When it comes to loading in references,
Mhm.
lower references to different versions, for example.
Ah. Okay. Nice. Loading reference. Okay. Dependencies with
Dependency stuff.
conflicting or different versions.
Conflicting or just different?
Dependencies
Conflicting just means it will fail. But
with different dependent requirements. I don't know. How do you
that's
say
not
it? With
confusing. That's not confusing at
I
all.
know it's hard to articulate this in a question.
Dependencies with different dependent versions.
With different dependent versions.
yeah.
Right? Does anyone know what that means? Dependent versions. Okay. How does that work? Okay. I think that's probably enough, right? Okay.
Good questions.
Answer those.
All right. So
I'm going to go and answer email.
all right. Let's start with an application from scratch. So loading assemblies is interesting. So we actually, for core CLR and desktop, we actually hook the assembly resolve events in both cases. Whenever a request to look and then for a name, we do magic.
So there's an event in the CLR, called assembly something.
resolve, and
Assembly
there's
resolve.
one for in core CLR that's even lower.
Okay.
So whenever a load request comes into the CLR, we actually get full control and we can do stuff. And we have a bunch of pluggable loaders, so that's why compile from Rosin just works. Let me actually create something here. So console application.
So people know about Fusion today. This is the
Fusion.
part of .NET that loads assemblies.
And the GAC and the whole walk.
Right.
Local versus, yeah.
And so there's an event that even exists today, right?
Yeah.
That happens that when an assembly gets loaded by the CLR, you get a chance to change stuff. And we're using that.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'll create a class library as a project reference. I'll add it.
That is some big text, sir.
It is, right?
It's very big text. 12 lines on a screen at a time.
I could make it 50%.
There we go.
No, I can't see it.
Now I can see it.
It's perfect. All right, so class 1, I'll make a static method. Static. In B. And no, I can't see it. This guy will return A plus B. Yay. And this guy will call assembly, not that, assembly dot load, new assembly name, class 1. Is that what I called it? Class library 1. All right. If I run this, it prints a bunch of stuff. If I look here, I'll just try to zoom in on this. Can you guys see this? Is it big enough?
I think you can see it. Yeah.
Can you see it? All right, so it did a bunch of stuff. It loaded the runtime itself. It walked the dependency graph to figure out what the dependencies were. Each loader gets a chance to figure out what it should load. So for project references, it found console app only. For reference assemblies, it found MS core lib and system core. And then it loads the entry point itself for the console application, which is source, so it compiles it on the fly. So it sees a folder full of sources and JSON file, and it says, I'm gonna load this assembly name console app 1, and the loader actually kicks in and says, oh, there's no DLL, so make it on the fly and return to the runtime. So what happens here is it's called the entry point, and I'm gonna hit F12 over this line, and I should have an assembly. If I could hover.
Locals will do. Or
Watch.
not. CTP tooling, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, if you look here closely, I called load, and that triggered an assembly load event. That went all to the runtime and says, Roslyn found class library 1 as a folder on disk. And it said, let me resolve dependencies for that folder and compile it on the fly. So the loader, so we actually plugged in that load in CLR to hook the events. So when you're actually compiling on the fly, it's actually a load event. It's not actually being compiled. It's all runtime, if that makes sense.
Did that answer the question? of the gentleman who asked that? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. Actually, I'll take this point to make I'll take this moment just to make a point. One of the really interesting things that I think about how this has changed in this next version is Scott talked about how .NET is a Windows component and how .NET integrates with the operating system. And so today when you make a console application like you just did, it compiles an exe, right? We all know this. And you run that exe from the command line, whatever it might be. How does .NET get loaded at that point? Because it's just an exe, it's very small, it doesn't have .NET in the exe, right? And so there's actually a special flag essentially in the exe that tells Windows this is a .NET app, right?
Bootstrapper.
So when you boot me, can you please go and boot up the CLR? That code is not in the exe, it's somewhere else, and then run my exe.
Right.
We are not taking advantage of that in this version of ASP.vNext. So we wrote a console app there that was built on top of ASP.NET vNext. That's not at all confusing, I know. We have a console app using the ASP.NET vNext
runtime
stack, right? Which includes a custom CLR host. We're not using the CLR host that's in Windows. That's what lets us make these things run across operating systems and as source. So there's actually a native executable in the packages folder somewhere.
Right. So if I look here on disk, if I go to this guy, of course, spaces. All right. So there's nothing in bin. If I run krun, that actually calls the entry point. Same as before. That ran.
What's the entry point you're referring to?
The entry point being program main.
Okay, static void main.
Same as before, yep.
Right.
As we're all used to. So you see it loaded, this thing called KLR net45 DLL. That's the actual CLR host. That's in, let me navigate
So what's that written in?
C++.
Ah.
I know.
Nice. Any C++ people here? No, it's the wrong talk for you. You shouldn't be here.
So yeah, if I go into the user profile, .kre, there's a bunch of packages here for runtime versions. You saw with Scott earlier. And these are all dev builds. So I'm running 489 at the moment.
Hang on. These are all versions of just the piece that knows how to boot .NET.
.NET.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of versions.
And in the bin folder, there is the one piece of native code, this and the DLLs, that boot the actual CLR. So there's one for net45, and there's one for core CLR.
Right. Because we keep talking about this core CLR, right?
Yep.
So who has heard of core CLR before ASP.NET vNext? Has anyone heard of it before? Does anyone know where it came from? Silverlight.
Yeah.
Okay. So Silverlight had a cross-platform CLR. It ran on Mac.
Yep.
There was Moonlight that ran on Linux, and it ran on Windows. And that used something called the core CLR. The core CLR also shows up in Windows Phone, because Windows Phone was based on the Silverlight runtime up until the most recent version.
Yep.
And so this same core CLR, what's interesting is that that's built from the same sources as the desktop CLR. It's actually the same source code. It gets compiled twice. And so the core CLR is obviously smaller. It was designed to be portable. It was designed to run on small devices with low resources. Okay? In the world of the cloud, you want your app to be able to run on the machine that's just the right size for you, because you don't want to have to pay more than is required for your app. So this core CLR is built to be highly portable and optimized for the type of scenarios that we want to use it for. We can run it on Mac, we can run it on Linux, and we can run it on Windows. And because we have a native exe, we can choose when you run your app, we make it at a very late decision. Right at the end, we say, okay, the app is starting. Do I want to use core CLR or do I want to use desktop CLR, the one that's installed in Windows? And that's why Scott could take an app on a USB stick and run it on someone else's machine, because the core CLR, including this exe, was copied onto that USB stick. Okay?
So let's look at that, actually. That's kind of interesting. So if we look at one of the server, if I have one installed, server C, something over here somewhere, 481, the bin folder is pretty different. There's the actual, a bunch of type forwards for native code, and then there's eventually, after all this stuff, core CLR DLL. This guy. Ugh. This guy. This guy has 2 megs. That's the entire CLR, the jitter.
Did you say 2 megs?
4.
You should be a PM.
4 megs.
It's about 2 megs.
It's tiny, it's tiny. If I zip it, maybe it's 2 megs. There's cross-gen, there's a bunch of other stuff. And if you keep looking, you'll see some familiar faces, actually. MS Corelib.
So this is the BCL. This is like the base class library itself. Okay.
This is the whole BCL, and the runtime, and string, and object, and everything you love. And
And JSON.NET, is that in that folder?
yeah, we love JSON. It's part of the runtime. It's part of our runtime.
Right. Okay, so
SOS
we're
for
built on top
debugging.
of this.
Yep.
Awesome.
There's
All
a
right.
bunch of DLLs in here for the entire runtime, as you see.
Awesome. Oh, we have XML in core.
Yay. That's
Rock
temporary.
on. Rock on.
No
All right, let's go
temporary.
back to the questions asked in this one.
All right.
Okay. What is the new project file system structure for VNext? So we talked about in the existing VS today, right? You have a solution. It's very solution-centric. Then you have a project file.
Yep.
Let's just ignore the ASP.NET website project system, okay? Everyone know what that is? File, new, website in
Web
VS.
project.
It's like a parallel universe, all right? Let's just ignore that for the moment for the rest of this talk. So we have a solution with a CS proj or a VB proj file.
Yep.
And then inside of that are your CS files. And then when you hit build, MS Build compiles that CS proj file directly. Like if you look at what's being invoked by Visual Studio, it's calling out to MS Build at the command line, passing in your CS proj file as a target and saying, hey, please go and build this for me. And it produces what? An assembly, right?
Binaries, right.
Binaries on disk.
That get
and then
run.
that's what gets run when you run it on your web server. The only exception to that, obviously, are your views. So ASP.NET today includes runtime compilation. It's called ASP.NET Dynamic Compilation, and that's what compiles your .aspx files, your Razor files, everything in your views folder, etc. And that's been around since ASP.NET 1.0. And you can pre-compile those with the ASP.NET _compiler.exe tool, which comes as part of the .NET SDK, so that you don't pay that cost on the web server.
Yep.
So you have kind of this split compilation system today. In VNext, compilation by default runs on the server, right, at the moment. Now, it doesn't mean it has to, right? So you saw Scott do a publish. That publish could conceivably compile assemblies, right?
In the future.
And put them on disk
Yeah.
in the future.
Yep.
Not saying you can't do that, but there was no MS Build.
Yep. There was
So
no
let's.
build.
So I think we all know how a current VS looks. Can we go and look at a file new VNext and
Sure.
quickly compare what that looks like?
Same
You add it
solution?
to the same solution.
Yep.
So that's a really good point. You can obviously just add a VNext project to a solution you already have.
Yep.
The SLN file stays around, right? That's a VS thing that has nothing to do with runtime or compilation, really. It's just to organize stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's different?
So first thing is the project file. If I open the actual folder for these guys, right here, look at the current world. There's a CS proj, web config, debug and release, and there's a bin unobj folder. And the bin has DLLs as normal, versus the VNext version, which has bin and obj too as just VS side effects, but it's empty.
So they're just VS side effects, you said?
Yeah.
Just
and
ignore those.
They're bugs. They're bugs,
Okay.
actually.
They
yeah.
will go away.
They'll go away.
Okay. Lots of bugs. Very early.
There's a K project in here. This is for VS tooling. In VS, a project needs to have a solution needs to have a project file. So we have this file just because VS needs it. If we compare the actual contents in the current world, if I unload and edit this project file, in here there's a bunch of configurations. There's dependencies. There's project GUIDs. There's a library type. There's the app folder. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here.
So hang on, this was the CS proj. This is
The
today.
CS proj.
Okay.
IS settings, output folders, references, assemblies, files, targets, a bunch of stuff.
So this is really serving two masters, right? Because this is serving as a compilation input. It's like when you compile, I want this file to tell me what to compile. But it's also supporting a whole bunch of Visual Studio stuff that has nothing to do with compilation.
So it's a mix of concerns.
It's a mix of concerns, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So let's look at the new one.
The new one, and there's still bugs.
So this is the
Has some
K
stuff.
proj.
It has configuration, which is always hard-coded to find to any CPU. There's a bunch of target files for VS to work, because VS does build on MS Build a lot. There's
On
a bunch
MS
of-
Build?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a bunch of debuggers for different types of apps. If your app is a console app, it uses a different debugger than the web application. There's a list of files in here. This list of files is not used by anyone.
In fact, I think that's going to go away.
It's going to go away.
That will go away. At the moment, the new project system watches the file system. So if you add a file from Sublime or from the command line, it will show up in the new project system automatically because it'll actually add that entry to kproj. But in the future, I think those entries will just go away from
Completely.
kproj. The project system will just show them regardless.
So if I go here and I add a text file,
They would have just trusted me. Oh, okay, it does work. All right. So,
it's all in sync.
okay. Look at that. It actually does work.
So the idea here is to merge the build system for runtime and design time to have the same compiler. Before you had webconfig, and that had a compilation section. So if you had views being built, you'd have different references than your actual CS proj.
Right.
There's always this,
now it's all one.
this mismatch between runtime and design compilation, and we're trying to bring it into one thing.
Okay, so if I wanted to take this project and work on it on a Mac,
Yeah.
the Kproj is not needed, right? The
Correct.
Kproj is completely a Visual Studio artifact. It's there to support tooling. Project.json is the thing that really drives ASP.NET VNext from a runtime and a compilation point of view, right? Okay.
So we've essentially replaced CSC with our own compiler. If I
Everyone knows what csc.exe is, right? The
Default
C# compiler. Okay.
CSC. If I close this this solution, let me get this folder first. Close this solution out. Yes, I'll save you. Go here. Delete the Kproj completely. This still works. Do you believe me?
I don't. It's just like, it's a JSON file and a C# file. How
No,
can that possibly work?
No, I'm scared. Delete that. I can go here, add existing project. Thank you, VS. Thank you.
Ah.
So this is how you can start migrating your projects over from the old to the new world, current world to the new world. You can take your application.
The future world.
The future
it's
world.
It's not even new yet because it's not out yet.
It's not done yet. You go in here, you drop a JSON file of your liking, then you open it in VS.
So that was interesting. So I added a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But those two files, you could have just run the app from the command line with just those two files, right?
Yep.
Let's prove that quick. Then we
Damn
can move on to the next question.
Damn it.
Come on. Put your money where your mouth is.
All right. Microsoft ASP.NET.
I sit behind David at work, like we're literally back to back, and this is all I do all day. I say, come on, make it work. Make it work. Type faster, Dev.
This is
Type faster.
Commands, web.
Nah, so you're lying to me. You did need to add some more stuff to
That's
make this
because the
work.
tooling didn't put this
So
in for
tooling
me.
added a bit of nicety for us.
I know.
So VS knows how to launch a ASP.NET VNext app, a
On
K
IIS
app.
by
I mean, we
default,
call them K apps internally. That's why you see K everywhere. It knows how to launch these apps even if you don't have these things. It has a default host, which is, of course, IIS Express. Right? So it knows how to host these things in IIS Express. If you're going to run from the command line, you have to kind of tell us what you want it to run on because the tooling isn't there to make that decision.
I think that's it.
And that's it?
That can be it.
There's no way you typed all those words and got it right the first time. With no IntelliSense and no error checking.
Come on.
I mean, come on.
No confidence. No confidence.
Not human. So K is in your path, right? That's why this is going to work?
That's why it's going to run.
Okay.
Attempt to run. If I do K run, it should tell me it can't find a main.
Okay.
Which is good.
It does say that.
Yeah.
1 point.
K web. Oh my god.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
2 points because you got to started. You'll get 3 points if it actually returns a response.
Yay!
Wait, that doesn't do anything.
That's because I didn't write any code.
Oh, okay. So white page was what you were going for.
Yeah,
Okay, good, good. So
Not
it worked.
crash. Not crash.
Not crash. And just to prove, this is actually a good time to point out that what you're going to see here is you have to run it again. So the other thing that VS is doing for you is that whole just make a change in VS and save.
This is good. This is
a
good to
good
bring
lead
up.
up,
This is
right?
good to bring up.
Just let me. Is that when you make the change, VS is going to restart the application for you by default. That's what it does. So we had to rerun it there at that point to get that change to be acknowledged, right? But we do have, I believe, a console or a command line version of that.
I can probably write some PowerShell actually.
Oh wow!
I don't know.
You're gonna go like
Anyone know PowerShell? Well, true. Does that work? Ugh.
Any PowerShell people? Ooh. Oh wow. Okay.
Must be one person here in this PowerShell.
There's nothing like going off script when you're already off script. Like
I
when
mean,
there is no script. It's like,
I've never tried this.
and now you're going to make a change. Okay, don't do it in VS. That's cheating.
I know. Okay.
Do it in like Notepad. Prove that there is no tooling. There's no net here, right?
Might
This
have
is, or hidden wires that we can't see.
The screen is so small.
Okay, save. I saw something happen on the console.
So it said changed.
It did say change, and then it said startup.
This didn't work.
Did it do anything? No.
It was close, though.
Okay, you lose all your points.
Wait, no. Oh, I know why. I know why. See, it works. It works.
Why would you? What did you do?
It's waiting for console input. That's why it's not working so well.
Because your PowerShell sucks.
That's because
Okay.
of the... So if I do this, and I actually save, and hit Enter,
That's nearly what we wanted.
it's close.
Okay, that qualifies as a bug. The feature works, but it's just a bug, right? Well done. Okay, that was good.
Can't clap for myself.
All right. So I saw in that wall of text, assembly neutral interface come up. So that's a good segue,
All right.
if I do say so myself. I saw it there. Let's talk about assembly neutral interfaces, because that was one of the questions. What is an assembly neutral interface, and why do we care, and why did we invent it?
Has anyone ever had the problem where they had to put an interface into an assembly, and they didn't want to take a reference on it because that assembly may have versioned, and the strong name may have made the reference to older versions of that dependencies break? So you have an iLogger somewhere, and you have 10 things depending on iLogger. And iLogger has never changed, but the assembly that is contained then changed. So then your references all break because the contract, the contract contains the assembly name itself. So the idea is to decouple the assembly itself from the actual contract and just have types.
Everyone get that? Everyone get that? Anyone shaking their heads? I don't see anyone shaking their heads, so that's good. All right.
That's good.
So that's why we do it, because
Yeah.
there's this problem today in .NET
Yeah.
of the assembly is the container.
There has to be an owner
It's
of the
part of the
assembly.
type name.
Yeah.
And so if the assembly changes, the type is no longer compatible,
Yep.
even if it's perfectly fine.
And the assembly has to be versioned, and it has to have an owner, and someone
Okay.
has to, and it has to have a
So how do
package.
we fix it? And how do we use it?
So what did we do today? I'll show you a demo I'll make from scratch, I guess.
Why
Thanks. Console application. Let's say we had a spec in .NET that was the open logger spec in .NET, right? So there's an iLogger interface somewhere in .NET, and I'm a framework like Nancy or MVC.
And when you say in .NET, you don't mean like in an assembly somewhere.
I mean a spec
in
somewhere.
the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Someone documented what iLogger should look like.
There's a code contract. Someone said
Okay.
iLoggers should look like this. Should have a log method. It's void. And take a string. Message.
Okay.
So today, what would happen is, this would be a contract. It'd be an assembly. It'd be called like common logging or something. And then people who depend on this abstraction would have to have an assembly like that was MVC.commonLogging, right?
Right.
So you'd always have to have a joiner assembly to bring in those references.
Okay.
So
Like a contract
a con-
assembly.
yeah.
And I'd have to depend on it.
on that thing, yeah.
Okay.
And deploy it.
And that's where the problems become, because now
Yeah.
if
and
you
that,
depend
thing,
on
that thing versions, and then
Right.
everything else breaks because of strong naming.
Got
right?
it.
So the idea is that you can mark your interface with assembly neutral. Assembly neutral. I need to actually, attribute. Attribute.
Oh, wow. You're going to actually...
Nah, that's too much code.
This is so meta. So you're going to create an assembly... You're going to create the attribute that says it's assembly neutral in an assembly neutral way.
Yes. And this itself is assembly neutral.
What?
All right.
So does that mean we never need assemblies anymore? Like everything just be assembly neutral, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Don't do that.
Well, you need implementation. So.
Okay. Oh, well, that's true. That's true.
So now, if I compile this guy, it's kind of crazy actually. Let me actually have a logger implementation. So I have a logger in this assembly that implements iLogger. Does a console write line. Oh. Come on. All right. Build this. So what just happened? So the tooling is broken because it gets confused with the neutral interfaces that are defined in your actual project, but that's temporary. We fix.
We will fix that.
Maybe sometime in the future, hopefully. I'll use good old Reflector 6. That's still free. Woo! We'll never upgrade. I should upgrade.
You just
All right.
keep on trucking, right? Oh, don't send. Keep on trucking.
Oh, this is actually hard to see in a console lab. I'll make a class library. Segue.
Segue.
Properties. I can change this to a class library. And if I had a proper resolution.
So that's interesting. So the new project system for ASP.NET projects, there isn't a different project type for class library
Correct.
or web app or console. They're all the same project type.
Same project type. The only difference is the entry point. So the only difference is who calls your main, right? So by default in the website, your main is the startup class. By default in the console app, it's a program main. For class library, the output is a NuGet package. So if I actually build this project, now I should actually have artifacts. These two things. Symbols and
Hey, what did that
nutcase.
build? That didn't build an assembly.
2 packages.
It built a package. So another interesting piece of information. When you build a class library that's built on ASP.NET vNext new project system, it doesn't build an assembly, it builds a nupcake. So that it goes, thank you.
Yeah!
Nupcakes. Woo! Nupcakes are the unit of composition for
And
dependent
reference.
and reference in ASP.NET vNext. All right. Now we support referencing code as well. We saw before you could reference a project, and we'll just leave it there. You can reference a
Projects.
code, which is a project next to you, and you can reference a nupcake, and we produce nupcakes.
The nupcake and the projects are symmetrical. They're the same things. So you see K10 and Net5 here. Those map one-to-one with the actual definition in the JSON file
Very cool.
right here. So you never have to think about it again. Ever, ever. I guarantee it. So if we look at this DLL, it has something pretty interesting in it. Recall that the logger itself is not defined anywhere. It's defined somewhere in space, right?
So you defined it in your assembly.
It was there,
Right.
but it's a contract. That's why there's no class in here called iLogger.
Interesting.
So where'd it go? There it is, right? So the name of the interface is the namespace plus type name. There's no assembly in the namespace. And what happens is the reference gets put inside out, so it becomes an internal reference in your assembly, and we actually embed it
Okay,
as
so
a resource.
Okay, I got to slow down here. Okay, so when our compiler, the new
Yes.
compiler that we wrote, we have a custom compiler based
Yep.
on Roslyn, right? What it did is it found an attribute that you defined called assembly
Assembly
neutral.
neutral.
So that's just literally name matching. You created an assembly called, an attribute called assembly
Assembly
neutral.
neutral.
We'll honor it. When it found an interface that was decorated with that,
Yep.
it hoisted that interface. It took it out of your app,
Yep.
and it compiled it into its own assembly,
assembly.
which it then shoved into the resources of this assembly,
Yep.
and it ensured that the console app 17 assembly, its reference to that was marked as external.
Yep.
So there's a different type of reference. An assembly can depend on
Yep.
other things that aren't external, I guess. But this one is.
For comparison, if I made it not neutral, compile it again. Hit F5.
right.
This is what you get.
And the reference is important because when the CLR looks at the logger type, it's going to say, I'm implementing this interface. And the CLR well says, okay, well, where's that interface? So, well, now it said, well, it's external.
embedded
I don't
resource,
know
yep.
where it is. It's external. And then our runtime host, the thing that loads all these assemblies, knows how to kind of unwind all this again, right? Okay.
So it unpacks the resource itself, and it loads that into memory. Each type becomes its own assembly.
Okay, so what happens when I've got two assemblies that both define iLogger inside of them? So now I have two iLoggers
right.
that are embedded, right?
Let's do this. Class library. This will be interesting.
You always love it when the dev says on stage, this will be interesting.
Damn, PM is demanding so much stuff.
I
All
asked
right.
nicely. That's not demanding.
So let's make it more real. Let's put this in. Ugh, that's not more real. Public, namespace. Give me a namespace that's more official.
Microsoft.logging.
Microsoft.logging.
Nice.
No, it's a spec. It's not owned by us. It's community.
Oh, community.logging.
Yeah, open
Open log
logging.
R.
We need a new spec, like Olin.
Olin. Nice. Open logging interfaces for .NET.
Yeah.
There we go. We just coined it.
All right, Olin.
Who's going to register olin.net right now? I'm going to check at the end of the talk.
All right. So Olin is here. I'll copy and paste it into class library 1 and class library 2.
So class library 1 and class library 2 represent two other frameworks that you may have installed from NuGet.
Right.
Right?
So now we need to actually implement these guys somehow. Console logger.
Okay. And maybe a trace logger.
Trace logger, yeah.
Yep.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, will that work?
It'll work. I need to install tracing for core CLR, which I think is there.
What's something
next
safer
one.
then? Come on. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's good. That's
Okay.
good.
Aim high. Let's do this.
No fair.
No fear.
All right. Come on, Rosalind. All right. Trace dot right line message. Interesting segue. I'll compile this, and it should fail. Did it fail?
Failed.
Okay, good. It failed because on core CLR, so this is interesting. It compiled for both platforms that I have defined in my JSON file. It compiled for both Net45 and K10.
K10 is core
is
CLR.
the core CLR version.
Okay? Core CLR.
Yeah. It's K1.0 actually.
Yeah.
So if you look in the log, to see this entire log, you need to turn on KRE trace. It's not on by default.
How would I do that?
You can do it either globally or you can do it in the command line. You can do
Just an
KRE
environment variable?
Yep.
Okay.
KRE trace equals 1 to turn this verbose log on.
Okay.
So it built for 4.5, and it found a bunch of stuff, 2 references to this interface. It made it the assembly, worked fine. And then it said building for K 1.0, did the same things, and then said, oh, can't find trace in the current context.
Right.
So this will happen as soon as you start porting your apps to the cloud optimized profile. We actually built a reverse package API lookup that I can't recall what the actual site is, but it's to help you find APIs. And we're hoping to put it in VS so it's easier to do in the future.
So that, just to point on that for a moment, Scott talked about how the cloud optimized version was smaller.
Smaller,
and
yeah.
some things are missing. And this is an example. So currently, that trace type that you were trying to use doesn't exist in that profile. And so it fails when it builds for that one.
It's there. It's just
It's different.
somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
So to find it,
We could fix
you
it,
kind of
right?
have to hunt and say, I think it's in system.diagnostics.tracing.
So
or
this
trace
is an
source.
example of something that's there but got moved
Right.
somewhere else. Okay.
Tracing 4. There we go.
Something.
And hopefully, it compiles now.
And so that will become easier, even though it doesn't work.
It said, nice try. So let me try system diagnostics trace.
It's tracing and
source.
trace. That's the same
Wait,
thing.
It's the same one. Oh. That must be it. This is great intelligence, by the way.
It is great intelligence. That's
This helps a lot.
very new feature.
4.0. Maybe it's in there.
Let's find out. So this will get easier. We're going to make a lookup tool so that if you want to find a type, you'll be able to type it and it'll tell you what package it's in because we may have moved it. It worked.
It worked.
Wow.
Found it.
Perseverance.
All right. So we have 2 frameworks, 1 trace logger. I should really rename these things. One is
Console logger.
console logger. And this guy consumes a logger. Let's make it more interesting. He doesn't have one. He consumes one. So there's a function in here called public static.
So this guy still has the interface,
Void,
right? He still
yeah.
defines the interface
Do
locally in his assembly. It says, I want something that looks like an iLogger. Now, if at this point you're wondering, this looks an awful lot like a lot of ceremony to get duck typing. You'd be exactly right. That is pretty much what it is. It's a lot of ceremony to get first-class duck typing in .NET.
Yep. All right, so now I have, so that's good so far, right? Do stuff. This is where it goes crazy. I'll pull in these guys as references, class server 1 and 2. Save that. And now VS is going crazy, saying that it has 3 guys who declare the same interface all over the place. And how do you know it's the same interface?
Right.
Because it's neutral, the compiler knows that it's the same interface, and it shouldn't complain when I build. But the tooling doesn't show it.
So I'm still getting squigglies in the editor because currently that doesn't work, but
so
runtime works.
I can call it console logger. Resolve that, and trace logger. I'll resolve that one. If I compile this,
it should work.
Should just work.
Should build. No failures, right? Look at that. Very cool. All right,
Yep,
there you go.
cool.
So it works.
Yep.
So that's how assembly neutral interfaces work. And it's not just something that you can use. The new frameworks themselves, all the new libraries, use this internally.
Configuration,
right?
yeah.
Configuration, dependency injection,
Yep.
The HTTP abstractions, a lot of the stuff is built on assembly neutral interfaces.
One use of it that we're seeing is, for example, in IIS, you may have a server-specific feature, disable IIS something, right? And Signar may want to use that feature.
Signal, I might. Okay.
Yeah, but you don't want to have Signar compile against IIS directly, right? It's server agnostic. So you have an interface that's defined as an abstract contract saying, I can do IIS stuff.
Okay.
And if it happens to be there, it'll use it and then call a function. Otherwise, do nothing. Right?
Okay. So
you get to feature light up on the
Ah,
fly.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can platform light up without having to take a direct dependency
on
the
things.
driver. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go back to the questions and pick another one. Why do you need Windows 8.1 right now? Because this is pre-alpha, and we all use Windows 8.1 at work on our laptops, and so that's what works right now. The intent is that this will work on Windows 7. Windows 8.1, Windows Server 2012. I think it'll actually be 2008 R2. I think we're talking about 2008 R2, 2012, 2012 R2, and future versions of Windows. Okay, so that's right now. The Windows 7 doesn't work right now, but it will do.
This is a good one.
How do you plan to move from today to vNext? Now, that's a big
Broad question.
because it all depends on what you're doing today. If what you're doing today is using, I don't know, MVC, let's go through each of the examples, I guess. So if you're using MVC today, and you've been MVC 5, a lot of the concepts in MVC will carry over. So there'll still be controllers, and they'll have methods, which are action methods. There'll be a view engine. There's a view, which has Razor. A Razor will get new features. The pipeline through which a request comes in, and then an action is invoked, routing, filters, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
They will still exist. They will be new versions of what still exists. All those concepts will be the same, but the types themselves will be different. They're different types. They'll be in a different assembly with a new version. You will have to at least recompile, and I can almost guarantee you'll have to change some code. Okay? But a quote-unquote pure MVC app, one that's very well architected, where you use dependency injection to put things in, et cetera, will port fairly well.
That's the intent.
That's the goal. Okay. The way the app starts up is completely different, right? So MVC on System Web has a global ASAX, where you do global configuration. We have startup.cs, which is familiar for those of you who have been looking at Katana, or if you use Signaler, which is built on top of Katana. If you use Web API, which was released after Signaler, and which was after MVC, Web API is kind of a standalone framework in the ASP.NET family today. Yep. And it has a lot of similar concepts to MVC. It has controllers, it has an HTTP pipeline, it has filters, it has authorization, it has dependency injection support, but they're all different to MVC, totally different. What we've done in the next version is MVC and Web API are now the same framework. So because they both have controllers, they both have filters, they both have action selection, they both have routing, and so we've unified those. So if you've written Web API today, I would say less of the concepts come over. Things like message handlers aren't on the server in the new version, but filters and controllers and those things are still there. The verb-based action method selection will still be there in the new routing system, okay? So a lot of the code you've written will still come over. Things like Entity Framework. There is a new version of Entity Framework, Entity Framework 7, that's being worked on right now. It is a drastic rewrite. It is literally a from-the-ground-up rewrite. The old Entity Framework 6 and 5, while they were new and they went out of band from .NET, they still had a dependency on what was in .NET. And then they took even that out, but it was based on that same model, the object context model. Entity Framework 7 is completely new. It's based on the DB Context API, so our code first.
Yep.
And so if you use the code first API for Entity Framework, that concept carries over almost verbatim. That code first, I have a DB context with DB sets, that's there. The way you configure that with the Fluent API, that's there.
Yep.
But some of the other things, like how do I flow a DB context and its settings into my MVC controller, well, that's new, because we have dependency injection built in now. Of course, you can plug in your own container. We have sort of a dumb default container that all of our frameworks use, but if you plug in your own container, everything will use that. So that will carry over perfectly well. What else? So if you're using Katana, generally most people who are using Katana today, for a start, it's a very small subset of our customers.
Yep.
For those people who are using it, they're either using it because they're using something like Signaler, which depends on Katana. So they have a startup.cs. That startup.cs will look a little bit different than what it does today, but there's not much code in there anyway, so don't fret about that. If you're using Katana directly, how many people are using it directly? Like, I don't expect many people to be using it directly. Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 hands. So you've like written your own Katana middleware.
Yeah, the case you have an existing server, we want to host some HTTP endpoints.
Okay.
Nice.
You want to host your own custom self-host type of endpoints. Yep. Some of those concepts will carry over. But the concepts themselves carry over one-to-one. Like we have middleware handlers, which are built on types, and they get plugged into a pipeline. You can chain them, and you can nest them, and that all carries over perfectly. There's a builder that's passed in. But the types themselves, again, will be different. Okay, so version blah, ASP.NET VNext, Katana is a lot of these concepts on system web and self-host. VNext is reimagining the entire stack with that in mind. So if you've written things on Katana, they will port very well.
Very easily.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you will have to change some code, but they will port extremely well. So I would encourage you to keep doing what you're doing today and be mindful of what's coming. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned, and no one's called me out on, is web forms. Okay, so we get this question. A lot of web forms applications out there. Web forms is in system.web. Okay, the assembly system.web. System.web is in .NET. It's in the .NET framework class library. It's installed on Windows, right? System.web is not part of this new story. Okay, we have a new HTTP model, we have new frameworks, etc. Hence, web forms is not in the new bits we're showing you, but web forms is still there, and we're still doing work on web forms. We released a bunch of stuff. I did a blog post recently about a Roslyn compilers for web forms and runtime views and MVC. So you get the benefits of that sort of purple box at the bottom of Hanselman's slide. In web forms, you'll get the new compilers and you'll get the new support for the new languages. Okay? We also have out-of-band components like identity.
Yep.
ASP.NET Identity just went to version 3, I think. That works in web forms. Okay? The templates for web forms have been updated to use the new identity system. Why is that good? Well, it means you use a common identity system whether you're in VNext, same concepts, roughly, or on MVC, Web API, and web forms of the current system. Okay? Some things that don't carry over, it does mean you miss out on some stuff, right? So the new DI system, the new common config system, startup.cs, iConfiguration.
Web config is gone.
Tracing web.config isn't used to configure stuff in the new world. It's only used to configure the web server if you're using IIS. So you won't get those new investments that are part of ASP.NET VNext on web forms, but you can always host them together. So IIS has always supported having a ASP.NET application with a sub-application, either in the same app pool or in different app pools. You'll be able to do that. You'll be able to have a web forms application and then a sub-application that is a VNext app, right? And so the URLs to the user will look like they're just sub, and they'll run in the same app pool. I think that will work. I'm not sure, actually. Don't know if that works right now. If they're different app pools or not, it doesn't really matter, right? Something will work. You'll be able to do things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's compare old and new, just for...
let's take as an example like a handler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's write a handler on current ASP.NET.
Yep.
Handlers have been around since the first previews, like 1999. And let's write the equivalent in ASP.NET VNext.
All right. File new. Let's see. There's a lot of stuff here.
Just search for handler. Beautiful.
Generic.
Generic.
All right. Hello, handler.
Sure.
Let's make it faster.
Make it async?
Yeah.
Makes it faster, right?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Of course it does.
I don't want to grossly be glossing over what async is good for.
All right. Override. task. So this is the current world.
Okay. Since .NET
right?
4.5.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe I renamed it.
Beautiful.
All right. Pretend like it's async.
Cheat.
Oh, I could just make it flush async.
Yeah, but there's no flush async method. You'll have to write it.
Come on.
Task.factory.from async, right? It's all goodness. These are the type of things that we can fix easily now because it's not on Windows.
This is awful.
Yeah,
This is your fault, right?
that's my fault. No, in my defense, this was already this way when I joined the team. It was too late for me to fix this.
I can't even like. I can't even function.
So what he's doing, I'm making jokes here. The API in System
We
Web
love
to
C#
do an asynchronous flush uses the APM model, the asynchronous programming model, which is begin end, 2 methods. But the handler he's using is the task-based handler. We don't have a task-based flush method, but you can convert a begin end based method into a task-based method with this task.factory handler helper. Yeah, see how easy that
awesome.
was, right? I mean, really, I don't know why people complain. That was intuitive.
This is Hello World in the old world.
That's Hello World, right?
Yeah.
With async. And it's text plain, so use, oh, this will be interesting.
Oh.
You have to actually, put it in. There it is, Hello World, right? It
All
did
right.
work.
So to port your handlers over to the new world.
Everyone's handlers look like this, right?
So
This is
easy,
how
right?
easy it is to port a handler.
Let's show you how easy porting your stuff is to vNext. 3 easy steps. So first we wait for it to load. Then IntelliSense comes in eventually. Right? Yep. App.run, async. That's it. I could flush.
So we have asynchronous write now as
default.
well. By default.
And a
Wow.
flush async.
That must make it better. Oh, and we have, look at that. We fixed that bug. Nice.
Oh, this is the old stuff still. Change start project.
What was that? Why'd that fail?
So we made a change to the runtime itself, and the version that's in VS currently is already incompatible with the newest version of the runtime. So to make this work,
Hang on. You mean the version of VS we released on Tuesday
on
this week?
Tuesday is super old.
That doesn't work anymore?
We're that
Great.
fast. We're that fast.
Awesome.
So
To be clear, though, if you just install that version of Visual Studio, it will
Yes.
work. It's
Yes.
only if you start cloning stuff from GitHub and using the KVM.
So if I did KVM,
Oh, my goodness.
if I use one of my custom builds,
That is a lot of
it'll probably
versions.
fail. So the version that is good is 4.6.6.
6.6. That's the one in Visual Studio, right?
All right. KVM.
So
alias
Scott wasn't
default.
joking. He was not joking.
All right.
All right. Magic now?
Now I probably have to restart something. But let's live on the edge. See, devs can fix stuff.
Look at that. You can't look at that. Like, in an instant. Perfect. It was that easy. You've ported it to
Yeah.
the new world. So if your
So-
app consists of one handler that says hello world,
That's how
you
you
can be
do it.
done in 2 minutes.
But more seriously, let's look at some MVC stuff for a second.
Okay.
Controllers. The screen is too small to show it side by side, right? Probably.
Just
I'll do it anyway.
zoom out your text and you can put them side by side. I think it'd be fine.
Ooh.
And go full screen.
50.
View full screen.
That's like 10 buttons.
No, just view full screen because you don't know the. There we go. There you go. Awesome.
Ooh. All right, so the left is current MVC, the right is new MVC. Not much differences, right?
I don't see any difference in the actual controller code at all.
Where's Waldo? Someone spot differences. Interfaces.
Ah.
But we like you, so we don't want to make you do this.
So that works too?
Yeah.
Oh. That's so nice.
So yeah, I mean, some things will port easily. This is an example of a controller that's pretty much the same as before. We're thinking about changing the namespace back just so you don't have to change it a billion times in your code when you port over. But that's still up for debate because it's a different thing.
Because it is quite different.
It's different.
Yep.
They're different internals completely. So if you customize controller factories or anything deep in the system, you're going to have to
Model
rewrite
binding.
the entire thing. Model binding
Whole new model binding
is
system.
different. So get ready for changing your code.
Okay.
But the app itself is nice.
But that's a nice start, right? I mean, at least things like controllers and the view engine and the action result system
And filters.
routing is a little bit different, but it's still there.
Yeah.
What does routing look like?
Let's take a look at routing, actually.
Because that actually has changed.
Oh, but I made it full screen. All right, routing. That's in app_start, route config on the left, and where is that here? Close. I'll make it full screen. All right, so here. So now we have same routes as before. Map route, name, URL, template over here because this made more sense, we thought. But defaults are the same. This is different, by the way. ID had this weird thing before that was kind of like db null.value.
Huh.
It was a value that meant null, optional or not. But now we have this new syntax for optional parameters. It's kind of nice, I think.
You like that? Did that come from Web API?
No.
Or did we just invent that like right now?
Invented it.
Nice.
On the spot.
Awesome.
Just now.
Awesome. I'll believe anything. I don't know. That's awesome.
There's two routes here, right? We have a single route table, not two route tables.
So previously we had one for MVC, or the system.web.routing.
Yep.
And then we had Web API had its own routing.
version.
Okay.
Right. So let's look at that in a second. In the old one, there is there?
Route config.
For Web API?
Well, you didn't tick Web API when you did file new, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Let me add a new one. Aha.
You just trust that return does the right thing when you can't see the
I
OK
can't see
button.
it, but if I hit enter, VS has the right focus, right, by default.
Sure.
All right. So before, for APIs, you had to go into a new world completely and configure routes.
Right.
That looks similar. But now it's in the same place. So
Nice.
Yay.
Woo! So this
Yay
is
for merging.
This is an undercurrent sort of theme, right? We're doing this everywhere.
Across the
Anywhere
board.
there is a common thing, so we can reel them off. There's like common logging, common configuration system, a common options system for pushing stuff into frameworks when you boot them up, common routing, common model binding system. What's that, 5? A DI system, that's 6. Common HTTP abstraction for all handlers, essentially now.
Yep.
Common middleware. What's that, 8? What am I missing now? Assembly neutral interfaces we shared before is shared by everyone.
Yep.
We're trying to make everything that it could be of use to anything anywhere common. And they all use the same thing. So you configure them in startup.cs, and then it flows through to everything in your application. And so hopefully what we'll see is other people will start building frameworks. Like we have some great .NET web frameworks today in Nancy and the REST one. Simple Web.
Yep.
And we'll have equivalent frameworks for those built on top of this new stack. Or they may be Owen based, and we'll plug them into this pipeline in your application, which we can do as well. We're out of time. If you want to learn more about this stuff, watch the Tech Ed videos. There's one with you and Hanselman, who do more deep dive stuff, but different. Go up to the GitHub repository. You want to go to github.com/ASP.NET/home, and that will get you started on how to start looking at this stuff and even contributing. If you're that sort of person who wants to get in and get your hands dirty, log issues, contribute to code, send pull requests, we're taking pull requests now, so we'd love to get your feedback. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.